against police officers, you know, they've not been unfairly treated. If they ended up being convicted of a crime because of violence they committed, I got no real sympathy for them. Now, if there were people who were on the periphery that were swept up, over prosecuted, whatever, and they have a way to seek a recourse here, I have less of a problem with that. But I draw the line at violence. If you've committed political violence, if you attack the government building, if you attack police officers, I got real no sympathy.
Scott, you don't have a problem with Todd Blanche handpicking 5 people who Trump can fire at any moment and giving reparations that are then not disclosed to the American people who are paying for this slush fund?
Why do you know it's not going to be disclosed?
Because because it says so.
Is it to be public in whole or in part?
I mean, kind of like, like I have an issue with the...
So wait, it is going to be public
In whole or in part?
So this is not a true fact.
There are parts that they could redact.
Not disclosed.
You mean like the
It's not
file?
private function.
I think that's a great example.
Look, I'll just
I have an issue with the congressional slush fund that has paid
I
out
agree with you. That's all done in
sexual
secret.
claims
Yeah.
with our taxpayers.
That's all done in
and we
secret.
don't know
I
it.
agree.
Right. And that should be transparent. It is shameful that it's not. It is ridiculous that we're even considering this in any way a right thing to do.
Look, I think transparency is important, and I'll
Yes,
but I
sure.
look, I do think, partisanship aside, politics aside, people are often, have been, will be treated unfairly by the federal government and the Department of Justice. There were certainly people during the Biden years, pro-lifers sitting and praying quietly on sidewalks who were treated unfairly. So, look, I don't think we could say the federal government and the Department of Justice is perfect. It is not perfect. And if somebody did have something happen to them that's unfair, are you saying they shouldn't be able to petition their government for some sort of recourse there? Because I do believe that.
But
Now,
they
whether this
can't.
fund is the right thing,
They
I
can't.
don't know.
At a state level, at a federal level, people who have been unjustly targeted. I mean, we see it all the time with people who've spent, I don't know, decades in prison, and it turns out that they are innocent.
It happens.
And then all of a sudden, they get out. They're proven innocent, and they are given reparations for the money.
For those people.
Of
Or
course.
no less. How do you see this? I mean,
No, that's just-
could the King family come back after what happened to Dr. Martin Luther King being jailed? I mean, how do you see this playing out?
Well, first, I just want to salute you, Sister Sarah. First time I get a chance to meet you.
First time I met
High-quality
you in
journalists, just like you and Abby. It's high quality. It's always a blessing. But I just want to hear my dear brother Scott try to rationalize this in some way, and I see you're getting checkmated here. Because there's just no ground for justification of this unless you open the gates and you got trillions of dollars for ex-slaves and ex-Jim Crow people. You got 6,000 at the Innocence Project just at Harvard Law School of people who've been incarcerated. You got 2.2 of mass incarceration. I've been blessed to teach in prison for 49 years. Now tomorrow is Malcolm X's birthday. He's 101. What is it about Malcolm? Well, what we're talking about is this is just the peak of an iceberg. When you're living in an empire that is unraveling because the hatred and the greed is overwhelming. And so there's no sincerity, there's no integrity, there's no character. So people will justify anything in the name of power and might as opposed to integrity and what is right. That's a spiritual crisis. That's a moral crisis. Malcolm X was right about that. I was glad to see his face on that magnificent banner down there in Alabama when they marched in Selma and Montgomery. Martin was there, Fannie Lou Hamer was there, but it's not a question of skin pigmentation. It's a question of character, integrity, and the attempt to do what is right. There's no integrity in justifying $1.8 billion of people who engaged in criminal activity actually killed some policemen. And they get compensated, they get reparations. If black folk, indigenous folk, other folk, unfair, even white brothers and sisters who have gone to jail innocent, who deserve some kind of accountability. There's no way you can justify this. But this is just one peak of an iceberg. What we're seeing is spiritual sickness, moral decrepitude, and political corruption on steroids. But the good news is, you still got folk in the country who are trying to exemplify some integrity and character and courage.
Peter, is
Amen.
there, and to you also, Sabrina, is there a
Amen.
way to fight this? Because there has to be someone who's injured by this, right? So the public, the general public, who would say, hey, these are my tax dollars, they're not really considered
Oh, if
victims
only
of
the
this.
taxpayers had a claim against frivolous spending by the government. That would be a wonderful thing to have. No, I mean, the Trump administration is going about this all wrong. The way you're supposed to do is you're supposed to have folks set up a nonprofit, and then you either have a company do third-party payments into the federal government for leniency, or you just allocate tax dollars from like the Inflation Reduction Act, and that goes to your political allies. That's how you button it up and make it legal and avoid all of this. But to your point, like on the historic discrimination, I mean, there was
Yes.
$2 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act that was allocated for black farmers in the South who had been historically discriminated against by the USDA. Like there have been tons of programs that have done this. I think there's a very legitimate claim, and let's be very clear, I agree with Scott. We're not talking about, and if they are, I condemn it, money going to folks who violently assaulted police officers. I know folks who were at January 6th, broke no laws except they were on the side of an invisible line, did not enter any building, were not violent, whose lives were upended and ruined, where other folks who were maybe not of the same political persuasion, who had committed, similar minor offenses, weren't even charged or didn't even have those charges brought up. So I think it's important that there is parity, and if there was an overcorrection or an over exertion in one direction, that tilt back towards the center.
Can I just say that we're talking about nearly $1.8 billion to the same president that said the U.S. government can't afford to pay for Medicare, Medicaid, child care, or daycare. So I think there are a lot of, and now you have on top of that the gas prices where people are paying, over $1.50 than they were before the war started. So I think when you look at this giant slush fund of money, I think people are going to look at that and say, well, what about me? What can the government do for me? And this is not going to benefit people. So I
When
think
did he
Scott,
say we can't afford Medicare or Medicaid?
he said
Well,
they cut it, and he also
for
no, he also-
non-citizens.
No, he
We
did
can't
say
afford it
that.
for
So he did
non-Americans.
say
We can't
that we
afford it for
cannot
non-Americans.
afford Medicare and Medicaid, and that should be pushed to the states to pay for, and that the federal government could further subsidize. But he did also say that the federal government cannot afford daycare and childcare for millions of families all around the country. So I think when you look at a slush fund of this magnitude, people rightfully are thinking that's absolutely egregious. I mean, it is.
But does everybody here agree generally that it is possible for the federal government and the Department of Justice to make a mistake?
Absolutely.
Yes.
But that
Okay,
is a mistake. It can be chronic. It can be
I
institutional.
totally agree with you. So
Okay.
if we all agree that mistakes
That's
can
right.
be made,
That's right.
do we all also agree that maybe it ought to be there ought to be a way for people to address those mistakes? I personally think
Oh,
there ought to.
absolutely. That's why I've supported reparations for black people for the last
With
50 years.
transparency and a board
That's what
that's
the
not appointed by
argument
the
is.
president.
That's what the argument
Why?
is.
What I mean,
What do you mean, why? Like, it's not an impartial board.
why would the executive branch not be involved in the administration of it if it's coming out of the Department of Justice?
I think what you were arguing was transparency, so
Yeah.
that we know where the money
Transparency.
goes.
I agree with that.
Right. It's
So if
gotta
you
be.
know where the money goes and you know what the details of the cases are, then maybe you could pick each individual case apart. Peter is right. There were some people who did terrible things. Committing violence against cops, terrible. But there were some people who got swept up in things, dramatically overcharged, and they weren't treated the same as people who got into similar situations under other administrations. That's absolutely also true. Should they not have a way to get their lives back?
But
I mean,
it's also true that the first act that this man did as president is issue a blanket amnesty and pardon for all of them. Not look at it case by case, not look at the ones that have been violent against police, which you say you condemn, but do it in a blanket fashion. And so that's not a good precedent for somebody who wants to issue reparations to people from January 6th.
I mean, they have been pardoned, so technically they could file for this and potentially get money, and there's a lot there. So we'll have to wait and see what this happens. But if we don't know who's getting it, then no one's going to understand exactly who is getting a piece of the pie. There's a lot of questions here. I think
I love transparency.
We haven't even talked about the constitutionality of it. You alluded to it. Congress has the power of the
It is a
purse.
question. It is a question.
It's a big one. All right, we all agree on that one thing, so I'm going to leave it right there. Next, the president publicly announcing he's calling off an attack on Iran tomorrow, raising questions about how he's managing this war exactly. Plus, on the eve of another revenge primary for Trump, is there room for dissent in the Republican Party? We will debate all of this coming up.
Well, you got to be able to, if you got to compete with the government or governments, pertaining to the separating them from local, state, federal. Don't you got to find somebody that's willing to take your case, that's willing to go in and stand in your corner for the violations that's happened to you? I put out these videos praying to God, hoping to God, that somebody will have a little bit of empathy to the degree that they know somebody, that they know somebody, that knows somebody, that maybe somebody would be able to set me on some sort of a justifiable legal justice. Because by and large, whenever you're broke, I mean, whenever you went through so much hell that you've literally broken you, how are you going to go out here and hire an attorney? I'd be lucky if I could hire a Domino's Pizza. It's really sad in the position, and basically it is a form of enslavery. People under condemnation, as far as I'm concerned, and it's unjust. And the more that we see this, the more we see the forces of nature reacting to it.
He does them, even if he doesn't win them, but they don't change the fundamental fact that he started a war that he doesn't know how to end, and he's just as stuck now as he was when it began.
So what we just heard him say on video today is, in effect, that Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region are negotiating with Iran. And if they agree to something with Iran, then the United States will agree to whatever they agree to.
Yeah, that doesn't really make a ton of sense there, because we are the ones that are in the conflict with Iran most directly. And is Saudi Arabia and the UAE going to be able to open up the Strait? Are Saudi Arabia and the UAE going to be able to enforce an agreement to eliminate their nuclear weapons? Now, that doesn't even make any sense. We are engaged in this negotiation, and look, it is just having such a devastating impact on this country. The cost of Donald Trump's policies just keep going up and up and up, none more so than the war, but it's certainly not the only one. So look, again, I think it's important, and we can lament all the terrible stuff that Trump has done. I think it's also important for a path out, and that path out is not to start bombing again. That doesn't get us anywhere. The blockade's not working. We've got to bring in the rest of the world and negotiate an actual agreement from Iran. And it's terrible. Trump has put us in an incredible position of weakness, but continuing this comes at such an incredibly high cost. We have to get real negotiators to get in there and actually start working to find some agreement to end this war.
In terms of high cost, the high cost for the American consumer, the American taxpayer, is something that Donald Trump has basically said he doesn't care about. He's not even thinking about. How does that work? That seems to be reflected in that New York Times poll.
Yeah, look, I mean, and the thing is, and I listened to the people saying, I voted for Trump, I regret it, he didn't do what he said he was going to do. I mean, I'll take that, but look, Trump said when he was campaigning this time, he's going to go out and take vengeance on his enemies. He's in it for himself, 100%. Now, that isn't that he doesn't occasionally have policies here and there that he sort of, flits around with all over the place. But at the end of the day, he wants to have as much power as he possibly can for himself. He doesn't care about us, and he wants to use our government, the Justice Department, the Defense Department, the Department of Homeland Security, to settle his personal scores and just basically for his ego. Whether it's renaming the Kennedy Center, tearing down the East Wing of the White House, now he's putting up an arch. He's doing all. Look, this is unbelievable to me. I mean, this is an authoritarian destroying our representative democracy, basically just for the glorification of his massive ego, and we're all paying an enormous price for it. So it's time to wake up and hold him to account for it.
Congressman Alan Smith, thank you very much for starting off our coverage tonight.
Thanks, Lance.
And coming up, Elizabeth Warren is calling it corruption on steroids, and Donald Trump is lying, claiming that he knows nothing about it, as his Attorney General is planning to hand out almost $2 billion in what could be secret payments to violent criminal Trump supporters or anyone else Donald Trump wants to give money to. That's next.
Well, maybe that's the only way to turn things around. Maybe that's the only way to reimburse people for their damages. You can't tell me that what went on in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, with ATF and FBI towards not only forcing the death of so many people, especially innocent people, women and children, but also connected with the Oklahoma Bob. You can't tell me that federal government agency should not be held responsible or accountable for what they've done, especially whenever it comes to them entrapping, purposely teaching the Branch Davidians and how to take a standard gun and turn it into a semi-standard gun. It's awful in what we're seeing. And if I had the power, if I had the money, and if I had the authority, I would go to Texas and take care of the problem myself on a legal basis. But whenever you have all these different amenities to where the judge can basically get away with murder, or whoever's working for whatever agency can get away with murder, and they're not going to be held accountable and responsible for bad calls or misjudgment calls or purposely violating people's rights, what do? You do like I'm doing. You make video after video after video, and you hope to God that maybe somebody out there will hear, that will look it up, analyze it, and have the same opinion that, wow, this person really did get violated. Let's go after those that violated him pertaining to their work status, and let's try to bring some sort of justification in this person's life. That's how you do it. If money has turned into justice, which apparently that's what it has done here, then everybody that gets violated incorrectly should have the right of being rewarded off of the money reward system. Where years ago, especially thousands of years ago, if a person done something that was in violation, kind of like what goes on over there in Saudi Arabia and some of those other countries, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. If you get caught stealing, you lose one finger. If you get caught stealing again, you lose two fingers. If you get, it just builds up. It builds up, or they actually take a whip to them and beat them physically. Well, that's how they practice justice in bringing that type of penalty to a person's life that maintain law and order. Today, what they're trying to do with the pen supposedly being more mightier than the sword, they've made a mockery out of justice. They've made a mockery out of justice. Especially people like me that's been roughed up by local, state, and federal government and makes videos, and people think that I'm still lying, or I got incredible imagination, or I'm sick, or I'm a whack job of some sort. Huh. You tell me who had the right of going up to LBL and praying for the tables to be turned. Wasn't going to get no justice no other way.
The United States Treasury to pay $1,776 million to criminals who were convicted of violently attacking the Capitol in an attempt to overthrow a presidential election won decisively by Joe Biden. Donald Trump did this in the form of a so-called settlement of a lawsuit that he filed against the federal government, which he controls, for $10 billion, when Donald Trump's attempt to basically steal $10 billion directly from the federal government became politically unbearable even for Donald Trump. He forced the Justice Department to settle his case, which is a frivolous lawsuit of no merit at all. And the Justice Department announced the settlement today, landing on the magic number of 1776 as the precise figure for a fund called the Anti-Weaponization Fund. The fund will be controlled by Donald Trump and his Attorney General, and nothing the fund does needs to be made public according to the agreement. Nothing the fund does can be questioned by anyone outside the fund, like a court. The fund will be run by 5 members chosen by Donald Trump through his Attorney General. The fund will pay unlimited amounts that will not be taxable income to anyone Donald Trump and his Attorney General decide have somehow been victimized by being prosecuted for their crimes, or they could just give the money to anyone who claims they've been in any way bothered by the American legal system. When asked about it today, Donald Trump told this lie. He said, "I have to tell you, I know very little about it. I wasn't involved in the whole creation of it and the negotiation, but this is reimbursing people that were horribly treated." Donald Trump is the plaintiff in this case. It is impossible to legally settle a lawsuit without the plaintiff knowing everything about the settlement and approving everything about the settlement personally. Donald Trump's lawyers would not be allowed legally to settle this case without Donald Trump being involved in that settlement. So Donald Trump continues to lie and continues to believe that there is no way of insulting the intelligence of elected Republicans in Washington or his Republican voters. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California. He's a member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman Khanna, we have never seen anything like it, and as I read this thing, it's really open to Donald Trump to give money to anyone he wants to, even if you weren't prosecuted for anything by the Justice Department.
Lawrence, this 1776 fund is making a mockery of every principle of our 1776 founding. I mean, it's literally Donald Trump stealing American taxpayer money and giving it to his criminal allies. No president in our history has ever just stolen American taxpayer money like this. And what is shameful is at a time where Americans have more costs of food, of gas, of utilities because of a war Donald Trump started, he's not taking this money and giving a check to the American people as any decent president would do. He has no regard for the public good. It's shameful. It's the most corrupt administration in American history.
The details of this are really quite stunning as you read them. It includes the fact that they make no claim of being able to prevent anything illegal from being done with the money by any recipients of the money.
Absolutely not. I mean, look, Todd Blanche, who is the acting Attorney General, who's blocked all the Epstein files, he's going to get to appoint 5 people on a board who are basically going to determine who gets the money of this tax dollars. There's no legal process. It's Trump's cronies getting to distribute working class money, taxpayer money, to whoever supported him. And these are criminals. These are people who invaded the Capitol. These are people who beat police officers. It is just total corruption in plain sight.
And then it's a 5-person group, and a quorum is defined in the agreement as 3, and a majority of that quorum, 2, is all you need to actually get one of these payments. And it's just, and there's no, as I read it, there's no requirement for any of the decisions, anything that is done by.
Witness report this attack in San Diego. Left-wing activists stood outside a New York City courthouse and celebrated the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Take a listen.
His children are better off without him. They need to learn to not be like their dad and enjoy the blood money. Okay?
I'm standing on this as Brian Thompson. I don't give a flying about it.
When will Democrats condemn this type of hateful, dangerous rhetoric? More on that next.
Enjoy the blood money is what you said. Wow. That's kind of raw and rude, to say the least, when you say. But then again, look how the insurance company does rake over the American people by lying to them. But then again, that's the reason why that we do have courts and we do have laws. it's a sad state of affairs because of what various politicians and what administrations have done for what we are right now. It is really, really irritatingly sad. Like I said, to think that they think that all this is just stuff will go away. Wow.
Musk made for a good plaintiff in this case. He had a lot of personal interest in it, and he was no longer involved. Usually somebody has to be involved with the nonprofit to claim that the nonprofit isn't following its duties.
Musk's team has already promised to appeal. They've argued that Altman and Brotman stole a charity and that this sets a dangerous precedent, allowing people to loot nonprofits. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that Musk will certainly appeal, but I think he has quite an uphill climb to get anywhere. It was a jury decision, and usually it's the jury that decides the facts, and so he'd have to say that no reasonable jury could have come up with their decision. I don't think he's going to make it that far, but that doesn't mean.
In check, ranging from energy subsidies, and they've also waived social welfare service fees and also implemented free lunches at elementary schools. So, well, it looks like it's a mixed picture from here, and what will happen, we'll keep tabs on.
But I think I had this craving for it.
Okay. Okay. What else is on? No, we don't want to know that. What else is on?
Jacob Rubashkin on Campaign 2026 and this week's top political news. Then we'll talk about the growing public backlash against data centers in light of the artificial intelligence boom. First with Neil Schulson of the Abundance Institute. Then with the director of the Public Citizen Energy Program, Tyson Slocum. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join in the conversation live at 7 Eastern Tuesday morning on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or online at cspan.org.
Tuesday.
Well, I can't.
This thing is so upside down. If you get to comparing in how judgment calls are made, let's say over in Europe, that they look at both angles, to where most judges over here only look at one angle. It's sad. But look to all of us. God bless America and God bless our troops. And shalom.